Right, hello. I was looking through the library of things that run in MAME, and I thought, what doesn't really get much attention? And it was the DECO Cassette games that were some of the first to come to mind to me. Now, the DECO Cassette system is a tape-based arcade system that was put to the arcades in 1980, so the same year Pac-Man was released. And it was used for several years. I mean, there are games going, right down to 85, I think, was the final game with Boulder being released. So I just wanted to look at a selection of them today on stream. Now, I'm going to start with Explorer, which is one of the more recent dumps. And I say more recent, it's been a good few years now. I think progress on dumping them or locating any undumped ones has stalled, which is a shame because there are quite a few known but still undumped titles, especially regional variations, alt revisions and things like that. But Explorer is one of the unusual cases where, in addition to the cassette tape, there is an extensive amount of data stored in ROM too. So I'm going to coin it up and play it, and you will see it's quite an ambitious game. There are several sections to it. It starts with this tunnel shooter section, so we'll shoot our way through. Now, apparently there are different graphic variations of this, which would require different graphics ROMs and maybe a different cassette tape program. The cassette tape program we have does seem to match these graphics because it checks for specific things in the ROM and they do agree with what it's looking for. But this first section has some slight Tempest influence, I'd say. And it doesn't really play like Tempest, but the enemies get closer to the camera, then move around the edges, and if they're at the edges, you have to avoid them because you can't shoot them at that point. They are just there to kill you. And when you move them down, you kind of flip between the top and the bottom, so it's not complete control over your movement. But then after that, it evolves into this more regular shooter section where you can't move up and down. And I've been killed. So yeah, it's not a simple game with only one scene to it. We've still got a sort of into the starfield type view, like the tunnel, but not a tunnel in this case. Although this section is a little bit trickier. And the enemies are unforgiving, and they home in on you. You can't move out the way by moving up and down. So I have completed this section before, and I will give it another try. Again, this is quite a slow name entry screen, so let's just press end. Now, this is one that was released, I think, midlife of the system, so not too early, not too late. Quite Galaxian-like sound effects there for the credits, I have to say. But yeah, this one was one of the ones that wasn't properly dumped for a long time. I mean, I think it was a partial dump. The tape was dumped, but the graphic ROMs weren't, and then the graphics ROMs were dumped much later. So, I mean, this is missing from the multi-game that was available for the units, for example, the unofficial one that was done sometime in the 2000s, because at the time it wasn't dumped. But I think this is one of the more impressive looking titles on the platform, so that's why I decided to start with this one. Now, if anybody in the chat has any favourite DECO cassette games, then let me know, or if you've never actually used anything on the platform before, also, it'd be good to hear from you. Just curious to know how aware of the platform people are, because there are some important games on it, although a lot of them did get also on-board releases. I mean, it's got Burger Time on here, and it's also appears to be the origin of Burger Time, because the Japanese version that's just called Hamburger was on the DECO cassette system, and I don't believe it was ever released as Hamburger in the arcades outside of the DECO cassette system. Yeah. I'm just trying to concentrate a little bit here while I dispose of these enemies. Thank you, KB. So I just thought I'd do something a little bit different and theme around a system this time. So I'm starting with this game instead of Explorer, but I'll try to cover in the next sort of 2 hours or so a variety of the games on the platform. Now we're back to a tunnel section now. If you notice the tunnel sort of changes shape as well a little bit. So here it is wider than it is tall, which makes it a little more challenging. The enemy patterns evolve too. Got a bonus to life there, that would come in handy. Now the enemies are actually on the tire map, which is why they have a black border around them. So it's cheating a little bit, but it works for how this game does it. I haven't actually counted the number. I mean, according to the main source, the numbering appears to go up to 44, but then there are some Mahjong and medal games that don't fit the numbering scheme. Most of those haven't been dumped yet, though. So I'd say you're probably looking at about 50 titles in total. And so not all of them are dumped, and there are definitely regional variations missing. So now we're back to this section. So you kind of see what the game has to offer. It loops around these two types of stages. Yeah, I'd say about 50 games, the Ogre, as a rough estimate. But there are some interesting variations on those games, and I have died on Explorer again. I'm going to give Explorer one more credit, because I'd like to play each game for roughly 10 minutes. I've not quite made 10 minutes on this one yet. So we'll give this one another credit. But yeah. So a lot of these were also released as standalone games, and I'll be talking about that a bit more later, because there are a few where I'm not sure if our emulation of the standalones is quite right, or maybe there is somewhere I'm not sure the emulation on the cassette system is quite right. But the problem with the cassette system is there are a lot of variations of the games. So even if you find original references, sometimes they can be of an undumped version. Flash Boy, which we'll come to in a bit, there's a horizontal and vertical version, and only one of those is dumped, for example. And Manhattan, which I showed in another stream, there are definitely versions that do more with the palette than the one we've got, changing the colour a bit more in different ways between levels. The problem is, obviously, these are cassette-based, so it's a very fragile medium, and they require specialist dumping tools really to get dumped. And I don't know if the others are ever going to show up. I know some of the ones are dumped and were never released to the public, but I think we can just forget about those until they turn up again, because the people who have them, they clearly aren't interested in them being emulated, or outside of their personal collection. Which is a shame, because you would have thought when something is this fragile, people would be keen to make sure it doesn't get lost. But as we've seen so often, that is not always the case. In terms of my own contributions, I did make some improvements to the DECO cassette system driver some years back. I can't remember the exact improvements I made at this point, but they were quite significant in terms of bringing some games up to a much more playable status that made them look a lot more like the references we had. Mostly video emulation fixes. Oh dear, I failed in the second tunnel section this time. Okay, so that's a couple of credits, or 3 credits I think, on Explorer, which was one of the more recently emulated ones. And I do enjoy it. It's a decent into-the-screen shooter with a little bit of a Galaxian style, well, not quite Galaxian, but regular shoot around between them. Yeah. Personally, I think it's worth a little bit of a play, that one. So now let's jump straight to the last game, the final game that was released on the cassette system, and it's maybe not one you'd expect. Now this was in '85. There were no other games from '85 as far as I'm aware. This is what is listed as game 44 in the list, before the the extra titles that have their own category. And this is Boulder Dash. Now, Zeroize did also do a Boulder Dash game outside of the cassette system, and I might put that on briefly. But yes, in '85, which is very late for the system, considering the system is 5 years old at this point, they did release Boulder Dash for it. Now, I'm not going to claim this is the best port of Boulder Dash in the world. Let's coin it up, and you'll see. You get to choose your start level, but let's start on level 1. Now, the system is a bit weak, so this is quite slow. I mean, if you look at the processor, it's it's less than a megahertz for each of the processors, apart from the Intel MCU that is for the cassette handling, and even that might be listed as a higher clock than it really is. So this is quite a slow Boulder Dash clone, but it does have the proper levels. Scrolling is a little jerky, controls are a little slow to respond. But I said before, there aren't really many good arcade Boulder Dash games. I think it's one of the Kyle Hodgetts did his Boulder Dash games, and they kind of stand out for not because they're good, but because there wasn't really an alternative. There was this one, there was the other Data East one, and then the Kyle Hodgetts games, really. I know things like Dig Dug and Mr. Do had elements of Boulder Dash in, but they weren't Boulder Dash. It doesn't play too badly once you get used to it being a bit slow, and kind of have to acknowledge that by 85 this probably wouldn't have been that impressive. But Boulder Dash itself is a solid concept for a game. It does take the Dig Dug Mr. Do formula and add a little bit extra to it. It's not revolutionary, but I've always had a soft spot for it. Oh, I got caught by the enemy there. I was trying to drop the rock on them and failed. I can't remember if this is a level where you have to. It's quite a strategic game, Boulder Dash. You might think it's just an action game, but in fact it's quite a puzzle at times. And knowing the patterns the enemies move in can be important. I'm not going to trap that there. Okay, let's hopefully not get chased down by that in a bit. Pushing the rocks is slow, you see. Nothing down here. Okay. I'm quite glad I blocked that path now. But we do have a wandering enemy now to watch out for, because you don't want to be caught by a wandering enemy. Come on. There we go. And yeah, when the enemies blow up, they make holes in certain wall types. Some of them drop diamonds, and that's why I'm saying it's a quite strategic game. You have to know where to blow some of the enemies up, because sometimes you can only get the quota of diamonds for each level if you blow the enemies that drop them up, or sometimes you can only get to the exit if you blow them up in the correct place. So it's quite a challenging puzzle game, really. And it does help if you've learnt the levels and know where things are. I mean, clearly the exit is not up here. I can't actually remember where the exit is. Time limit is generous enough at the moment. Now, there's the exit. Know where we started. I mean, I grew up with the Boulder Dash games on the Spectrum, and plenty of clones of them on the Amiga, PD clones, some better than others. Lots of them with level editors, which I think was one of the appeals to me. Games like Earthshaker on the Spectrum, which was a cover tape game, and I think it's got a modern version on phones and stuff. Personal favourites. Bit slow if you try and play them now, slower than this, but I might have to do a Boulder Dash style game stream at some point. But then we're back to the problem of the Amiga emulation in MAME being really not very good, which kind of cuts out half the Boulder Dash games I remember. But there were plenty on the 8-bit computers as well that maybe I could just cover anyway. Now here you can see it's less clear the direction you have to go. It's very easy to trap yourself somewhere in this maze, because you're kind of rushing to get the diamonds and not thinking about where the boulders are going to drop, and you have to be very careful. Yeah, this is a fully licensed Boulder Dash game. I'll probably have a look at the non-cassette system version, the much newer game, briefly after this. I did look at it on a previous stream, but I think as far as telling the story goes, it kind of helps. This doesn't look too promising. Again, I managed to get crushed by a boulder. I'm going to give this another go, because we can start on another level. Now this is kind of the classic random sound music that Boulder Dash had on all the platforms. To me, it was one of the first examples of non-music. It just sounds like somebody hitting random keys on a keyboard. So let's go straight to level 4. Now we've got a different, different element there. What does it do? It grows and occupies space. So that's like an extra time limit. So as you saw, I just managed to do really badly and lose a life very quickly. And this level has a lot of things down there, enemies down there that I believe are actually your source of gems in this level. Oh dear. And yes, if you hold the button, you can kill yourself like that, because that's not how you play this level. Yeah, you do have to let those out so you can crush them. I do remember this now. And this is the first time you really see there's a puzzle element that I just mentioned. Shall we try that again? Let's see if we can actually do this correctly, because that wasn't correctly. But yeah, it's a challenging game, and maybe it's not the most suitable game for arcades, which might be why there aren't many good arcade versions of Boulder Dash. It's one that requires some slow-paced, well-considered thoughts and carefully planned moves. Not, I'll just rush into this and hope for the best, which isn't an effective strategy when it comes to Boulder Dash, I'm afraid. Now they're going to chase after me, and I have to be very careful. There we go, I've got some diamonds out of it. Now I'm being very careful, I've got to move at the right time here. That wasn't the right time. How many of these do I even need? Only 50, and you can get crushed by the diamonds too. Did I say Boulder Dash is quite a tricky game, and if you fail you start over again, so yes, level 5 is already... I did that the first time I tried this level, didn't I? Okay. I've got to play a bit more Boulder Dash. I haven't played enough Boulder Dash yet, so let's play a bit more Boulder Dash. Yes, it does get tricky. I mean, this is only level 5, and suddenly you really have to think about what you're doing. And you've got to get 50 of the gems, and each enemy you kill is 9 at most, because they split into 2, I think, blocks. So you do really have to get a lot of these enemies trapped or killed. Now I ended up trapping them. I didn't really want to do that. So no, and then right, because if you're on the square next to them, they kill you too. It is very, very tricky. I think yeah. For now, I'm going to quit that one and briefly detour away from the cassette system. I will do this with a few games, but I looked at this on a previous stream. But the other arcade Boulder Dash game that was also put out by DECO, so they retained the license of these from First Star. But 5 years later, they did put out one on 68K based hardware, which is a lot newer, a lot more modern. As I mentioned before, it has a Boulder Dash and a Boulder Dash Part 2 title screen flip. I don't know if there's any real change to the gameplay, but now it doesn't say Part 2. You can select a world, you can not select a world. It doesn't follow the original level scheme, unfortunately, which is one of the things I don't really like about this. I would have liked to have the original levels in there. But it's obviously a much more colourful version of the game, a much faster paced version of the game. It's Boulder Dash for a 16-bit arcade platform, and it does what it says on the tin. And it's a bit more forgiving. The initial levels aren't as cruel as the ones you just saw. That's not to say it's easy, because it's not easy, but it introduces you to the mechanics more gently, let's just say. There you go. So I'm not going to spend too long on this because the focus of this stream is the cassette system games, but I just wanted to show that Data East did produce another Boulder Dash game, and this was it. So there you go. Bit better than the Kyle Hodges games, which I'm not going to fire up on this stream. I might put them on the next Maze game stream. Yeah, that is the other Boulder Dash arcade game. So back to the cassette system, and yeah, I'm going to look at one everybody probably knows. Where is it in the list? Dun, 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 dun. There we go, 82. Hey Scott, thank you for joining, and always good to see you. And yeah, it's been a while. I did check out those PC things you mentioned on Reddit. I've not put them in the software list yet. I might do, because I think they are proper unlicensed things from back in the day. They kind of run a little bit badly, but I guess they run just as badly on the real system and should be documented. But yeah, but thank you for joining again. It's good to see you. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've had a good Easter and everything. So hopefully you will enjoy some of these Data East cassette games too. I'm speeding through the loading with the insert key because they do take a little while to load otherwise. Right, so this is Hamburger, which appears to be the original Japanese version of Burger Time. So apparently before it was called Burger Time, it was called Hamburger. I think it plays the same. I think the levels are the same. So it is purely a title screen change, a text really change, because there's no real proper logo on this game. But it's one of those little bits of trivia that the game was, before it was called Burger Time, known as Hamburger. And I always find those cases interesting, especially when the game is known by a much more famous name, and where that more famous name was eventually adopted for all regions. I mean, you see that with Pac-Man. In Japan it was originally Pac-Man, but they quickly, even in Japan, adopted the Pac-Man name after the initial game. And that's kind of what happened here. I mean, I don't think the game has ever been called Hamburger after this initial release. There's a bootleg called Cook Time, not on the cassette system. But that's actually an interesting bootleg, because that bootleg on non-cassette hardware is a bootleg of the cassette system version, just on a ROM board. So the bootleggers clearly had access to the cassette system version before they had access to the ROM game, and bootlegged the cassette version, not the ROM version. I think there were one or two others like that, where the bootlegs appear to be based off the cassette versions. But, are the stages the same? I really don't know. I don't remember the Burger Time stages. This one kind of seems different, but it's been so long since I played Burger Time, I actually can't tell you. Because I'm not the biggest Burger Time fan. I found it's one of those platform games that's a little bit stiff. You know, you have to be in exactly the right place to go up and down the ladders. It's always annoyed me a little more than maybe it should. Yeah, they do take a little while to load. I mean, they're not too bad. There are far worse games, but any cassette media is going to take a while to load. Oh yeah, those are some big chunky burgers, aren't they? I mean, luckily for MAME, it's not the most demanding of systems to emulate, so you can hit the insert key and speed through the loading at over 1000% speed on any decent hardware. So I've got no peppers left. That's bad. Yeah, you do run out of peppers too easily on this as well, considering how often you seem to need them. That stage is stage 5, so they've rearranged the stages a bit. Okay. I don't know if the cassette version of Burger Time has those rearranged stages either. We'll have a look at it in a minute. There are actually 2 sets of that too, so it's possible that they change between the versions, because we will see that on some of the other games on here. The obvious little changes between the versions. Sometimes it's just the title logo, sometimes it's the game. Some of the, 1 or 2 of the dumps I feel a bit like prototypes that have still got no peppers. Even after dying, your peppers are not replenished. So this is tricky. But it's not quite got that Donkey Kong appeal to it, has it, Burger Time? I think Donkey Kong's a fairer game. I mean, I don't really know what I was meant to do in this case. I just end up trapped. So yeah, this was, you know, Hamburger, which is an early version of Burger Time, and it appears to be a Japanese release. It requires the Japanese BIOS. Most of these games were encrypted in some way or protected in some way. They had dongles associated with each cassette game, and without the correct dongle they wouldn't run because they wouldn't decrypt. So it wasn't as cheap as you think, maybe, because if it was just a cassette they were distributing, that would be really cheap. But they also had to distribute these ROM dongle things with all protection powers in for the encryption, so there must have been some cost associated with it. And they weren't standard cassette tapes either, so if it's one of those where if you know the AI, then you can beat it. Then I've never really studied the AI, but that makes sense. So yeah, it just explains the scoring anyway. So in fact, no, there's only 1 Burger Time cassette dump actually. I'm confusing it with the ROM version where there are more sets. But yeah, let's just switch to that then, because this was the US version, which was Burger Time. Hey Wolfaz, yes, Flashboy that is dumped is on my list of things to look at. The version that isn't dumped, I'd still like to see dumped at some point, because as I mentioned a few minutes ago, there were horizontal and vertical versions of Flashboy. Can you run games off physical hardware? You mean like the original CDs and stuff? Generally, it's considered not a bad idea. It's considered a bad idea, so we don't do it. Because if you're running off a physical disc or CD, there's always the chance that something in the emulation and the machine is going to change what's on the disc or in the CD. A lot of them are getting old now, and the PC drives will spin up too fast and destroy them. So really running from real media is a terrible idea. You should really back up your media before you use it. So with MAME, we don't really want to encourage people using potentially fragile media, potentially destroying it using the emulator. And we've seen people do that before. We've seen them use, boot an old system from a disk that then erases part of the disk and it's no longer in factory condition. And we really don't want people to be doing that, because it's important to not alter the original media, not accidentally destroy the original media because it's really old and fragile. I mean, you've only got to look at the number of people streaming tape-based games to see tape cassette drives chewing up the cassettes. It's far better to make a backup. Hey R09, thank you for joining the stream. I hope you had a good Easter weekend. And as I said, today I'm just looking at some Zeroize cassette games for an hour or two. I've looked at Explorer and I've looked at Hamburger, and now we're looking at Burger Time, which is, the name most people would know the game under. And yeah, we already saw that Hamburger actually has a different level 2, which according to Scott in the chat is level 5 from... I keep using my pencil and I shouldn't. Level 5 from this regular Burger Time. So Hamburger and Burger Time have a different level ordering. Oh dear. I don't know if there are any unique levels to each of them or if it is just a reordering thing. I mean, somebody more familiar with the games would have to tell you that. I'm just not good enough at them. And as you can see, I always estimate the collisions incorrectly. If even half the sprite covers half your sprite, then it counts as a collision, which is obviously not good for you. That went well. That went very well. That went so well, I think I'm just going to put some exclamation marks in the name. Or probably I'm not going to bother because I have to go there all the time. So there. So let's have another little play of this one. And fail it in all new ways. But yeah, I'd be curious to know what the differences are between the versions, if there were any unique levels. I don't think anybody's really spent that much time studying them. I know there will be one or two people who've played the games for high score, but a lot of the time when people do that, they don't actually note down any differences they've observed, which I find is a shame, because those are the people most likely to know. People submitting scores to MARP and the like are more likely to have seen everything a game has to offer. Assuming there are replays for these, I'm assuming, you know. I think the cassette load just put a few people off because every time between recording and replay, you would have to reload the game. Again, the collision got me there. Is it possible to play Galaxian 3 without a laserdisc? Not at present. I did do some hookup work in the driver, but I think it still wants some of the communication chips emulated before it displays anything. It's confusing though, because it does seem to try and upload a display list, but then I don't see anything on screen. So I don't know if there's just something I'm completely misunderstanding with the Namco emulation. But yeah, I couldn't get to display anything. And I think it is waiting on communications. Theoretically, if that was sorted out, yes, you could run it. It would be slow because it's basically 3 of the 3D Namco 3D boards put together. So if you look at the speed, something like is it Prop Cycle? No, I don't know. What hardware type was it? Or whatever the hardware type it was. If you look at how fast something like that runs, and then sort of divide it by 3. That's probably how fast Galaxian 3 will run, even without a laserdisc. So kind of slow. But at the moment, it doesn't show anything on screen. I don't know which one's dumped actually. I don't know. I know one of the Galaxian 3 things is dumped. I don't know which one it is. But yeah, I mean, Data East were trying some interesting things with these cassette games. Fried eggs in burgers are a Japanese thing. I mean, McDonald's have eggs in their breakfast muffins, and the burger restaurant here definitely has an egg option. So it's not something I immediately think of as Japanese, but maybe it's just more popular in Japan. Andrew, and thank you for joining, Andrew, by the way. Hello, and as I've said to everybody, I hope you had a good Easter weekend. And hey Tukyle1 as well. I was answering your question without saying hello to you. So hello, and hello mess drivers. Hello cow, and hello everybody who I have not said hello to yet. Now this attract mode is a lie. Look how many lives this attract mode has. That's not right. That makes you think you're going to get loads of lives. You're not going to get that many lives. Are you? No, you're not. The attract mode is cheating. Anyway, that was burger time. I'd love to. I'd love for somebody to actually compare the two versions, compare it against the release version 2, and see if there are any differences we've not talked about. So, Flashboy. Where is Flashboy? Okay, that's there we go. Flash Boy, hold on. Yeah, that track mode is nothing but lies, 009. Nothing but lines. Project Dragoon is probably the only one dumped then at the moment, or the other one's just not been submitted if it's been dumped. It might be that, you know, once the emulation improves, somebody will submit it. I really don't know. Sometimes these things surprise you. It's one I've looked at, but not one I've actually made any progress on. Now, this background looks an awful lot like the background we saw in Explorer. But putting that aside, this is a very different game. So, just watch the attract mode briefly. You have Deco Energy, which is apparently full. I wonder how much of a lie this attract mode is too. And a very Spectrum loading tape loader little line animation there. That really reminds me of what is it, Doomsday Castle and the pyramid on the Spectrum with their line drawer before they load the game. But yes, this is Flash Boy, and this is the vertical version because the horizontal version is not dumped. So it's not going to tell me too much. So as mentioned, it's got 2 directional scrolling, and it kind of in some way reminds me of Metal Clash, which is another Data East game we looked at on another stream. Again, that's the sort of flying around in space, or not in space, but above a planet with a jetpack. Robots in that case, shooting things. Now look at that. Look at the way this sort of zoom, almost like looks like it zooms in because it's moving the walls. Now I'm not going to say I know exactly how to play this game because I don't. I just try and play to sort of shoot everything or beat everything up game. Because this is another more recent addition to the driver. Again, I think it's one that might not be on the multi-game. Yes. Yeah, obviously the laser discs do need dumping at some point. It's going to be a different nightmare because it's got multiple laser discs, I think. But it should be possible to get the base emulation running before that. So I don't really know what's wrong. It does seem like there is a display list, but the display list doesn't show anything on screen. So it's one that's confused me a bit. And it could be failing to initialize some of the 3D hardware. Those Namco systems are complex. Oh dear, I didn't last very long on that. Oh, I am very great. No, I'm really not. Let's try again. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping we see some progress with the Laserdisc stuff in general. It's gone a bit quiet, but I'm assuming things are happening behind the scenes. I hope things are happening behind the scenes. It would be a shame if it is kind of just died out or got stuck in some kind of legal turmoil, or I don't know. These Laserdisc projects often seem to start promising and then nothing comes of them, which is a little bit of a worry I have with it, but it does seem like it's a more sound idea from the start this time. And the quality of the rips we've been seeing are absolutely phenomenal. Apparently it does also work for VHS tapes, but not the audio side of things, which is a shame. Because there are definitely VHS tapes and VHS-based games that we need some kind of effort putting into them too. A lot of them are terrible Mahjong games with awful adult videos, but they are what they are, aren't they? Oh, the background's changed colour. That must mean I'm doing something slightly right. This enemy's the same colour as the background. Very close. What's that? 2 hits on those ones for extra points, you see. But yeah, for a game this early, this one is actually quite creative. I mean, obviously you've got things like Defender that also have 2-way scrolling, and I think came around out around the same time. That's what I'm trying to say. But this does run smooth. It's got a little bit slowed down, but this cassette system hardware is very weak. And here we go. A different stage entirely. There's some nice patterns to the enemy, the movement actually as well. Ooh, that doesn't look good. There we go. Let's punch whatever that was into pieces. Got a little bit of music going on too. It's not the best music ever, but kind of a short little loop. Yes, it lets you move up and down. Again, it is a bit like something like Metal Clash, but an early version of it, vertical instead of horizontal. I don't know how the horizontal version of this would differ. I think there are videos of it running on real hardware, but I'm not sure we'll ever see a dump of it. I think we're quite lucky to have a dump of it in this version. I think I'd quite... one I'm maybe looking forward to more than others is the Hello Gateball one. That's probably not going to be that exciting to play, but I kind of hope that one does turn up, because there aren't many Gateball arcade games. The PC Engine's got a Gateball game, and there are Gateball games on other platforms, but not that common. Yeah, okay, let's play a little bit more of this. Now, I'm not going to spend too long on anything, because I'm kind of aiming for about 2 hours with this stream, rather than a full 3. The colours should be correct. I mean, there's been the colours on the DECO Cassette system were extensively studied. Again, some colour choices are a bit strange, and we know there are going to be other versions out there with different colour choices. The ice hockey game, for example, has got a very dark blue background, and it's confirmed that using the image that MAME uses, it does show up dark blue on hardware, but we've also seen screenshots where it's light blue, and originally MAME actually coded a lot of the colour emulation on the cassette system incorrectly, because it was trying to match the colours on things like that. And then it turns out the colours that we're seeing on things like that aren't even what the sets we had produced. So it's all fixed up, and now it does produce the same colours for the same ROMs, as far as I know. I'll give this one another credit, and I'll probably move on after another credit, depending on how it goes. I don't know how essential it is to change direction. And there's no radar like in Defender. I suppose it helps. That wasn't a good start, was it? Yeah, I should have really tried to look up some videos of the other ones for screenshot purposes or something before the stream. I'm definitely not doing that. I keep forgetting to use this attacker we've got as well. I think it's just a charge attack. It uses up some of your energy. But, would have probably got me out of a few situations. And that's scorpions, aren't they? Again, I'm not sure why you've got space scorpions here. Oh dear. That was quite a bad run. Okay, well, I did just say I was going to make that my last credit on Flash Boy. So yeah, that was Flash Boy. I'm going to briefly look over the list and see what I want to put up next. Shall we go with Tornado? Let's go with Tornado. Well, I mean, these games weren't available at home. This was DECO, a proper arcade platform. This isn't a home platform put in the arcades. I really like those Namco Classic collections, actually. I did feature the Pac-Man game on a previous stream. Play choice, no, I can't really understand the point of play choice. Or Megatech. Megaplay makes sense. Megatech doesn't. Now, this has got a very lazy title screen, just a text font. Yeah, I think the Play Choice 10 was advertising as much as anything, wasn't it? But yeah, here we go, Tornado. This is another sort of into the screen shooter. I guess they were sort of playing around with that idea because we saw Explorer earlier, and this feels like Explore but not Explorer. If you notice, there's actually more of a 3D effect here. There's meant to be different ridges between the sections you see there. So the enemies are going up and down over the bumps in the terrain. But it's got the same mechanic of if they're near the edge, you can't, you know, you have to deal with them in a different way. So I think the ideas were similar. They probably looked at things like Tempest. Well, I don't know about at the time. I mean, if we're talking 1980, I think this was still, you know, this is still going to be tricky to get on a home system. By 85 in Boulder Dash, sure. But the system came out in 1980. This is sort of Pac-Man era. And in many senses, this hardware is more capable than Pac-Man hardware. It can do more sprites, it's got more additional features. It can do stuff for the roads. Space Invaders sound in MAME is a long and hotly debated subject that I don't really have a great deal of authority on. I think it's probably acknowledged that it doesn't sound quite right in MAME, but it does sound right according to some references, or I don't know. Hey Christian, how you doing? Thank you for joining. Yeah, this is a bit of a Tempest clone, and it's quite difficult, as I'm finding. You do have a smart bomb, but I probably shouldn't waste it. But I think Data East did want to do something like Tempest, and tried different ways of doing it, obviously without having a vector monitor. It's very easy just to crash into things in this though. Yeah, this is a 1980 system. Definitely. I mean, Highway Chase is a 1980 game on it, and there's one of the other unnamed titles that's listed as 1980. So Data East are probably my favourite arcade developer, so I'm not really sure why you have such a poor opinion of them, Carlo. I'd rank them above Sega, personally, and Namco. But that's just me. They doesn't have a trackball, though, unfortunately. But, Data East just produced a lot of really solid classic arcade games, and even into the 90s. Hey look, I used a smart bomb and completed the round, but you've also got to save the people as well, yes. A level! I guess that doesn't mean much. So these things, I can crash into them on the outside. I'm a bit confused here actually. Is the outside safer than the inside? I'm not entirely sure the game mechanics that are going on here, I'm not going to lie. I can't crash into that one. I think, as I've said before, I think the cassette system is almost used for prototyping games, and we'll come to that point again in a bit. So I can get them on the outside as long as they're not explosion type ones. There we go. I thought locomotion was Konami. At least the locomotion sets in MAME, I believe. The Konami license to Sega and Konami license to Century. Everybody copied somebody else though, Carla. I mean, you can trace any game back to something else. There are very few genuinely original games. See, now I know you can just sort of hoover up the outside within reason. This is a bit easier. I do have my Flynn's arcade shirt on this. Anyway, I mean, probably playing the wrong games for Flynn's arcade, but yeah, Tornado. It seems an alright sort of wants to be Tempest type thing, but yeah, it's from '82. It's actually kind of good fun, that one, I think. Right. Now, where are we going to start this story? Okay. Graplop. Graplop, aka Cluster Buster. Now, this is one that is kind of curious. Now, this version is called Cluster Buster. So, 83. There are grapes, there are core grapes, there are spiders, and there are falling grapes. Let's pour a little drink. So, there are some Taito games much later like this. Pushy Sharad, I think it's called. But this is a very Data East concept, and we'll get more into that later. Use up to left screen, keep hitting the ball, it fall through the bottom. And Mr. Grapo. Hey Mitchell, how you doing? Thank you for joining. Also, avoid spiders. So, your button 2 changes the angle the ball deflects off when it hits the bottom here. You've got to stop the thing getting to the bottom. So, you know, I've got it at this angle now, it aims high. Every time you miss, the things will descend. So it's kind of almost got a puzzle bobble type mechanic, although this is obviously far earlier, where things will drop off once they're attached to nothing, not attached to anything. And there's somebody carrying a 2001 cart. Don't worry, this was not released in 2001. And you clear each stage by clearing all the chains without letting anything hit the bottom or touching anything that kills you. So I would say this was quite an original take on Breakout. Okay, I didn't get killed, so Patamon is clear. So this version is the one called Cluster Buster. This is the US release. The types of objects change. I'm going to try and play this again because that was a bad one. But yeah, this is an original concept, I would say. I can't think of any other game that's got the same gameplay. At least not in '82. But there's definitely somebody at Data East who really liked this game. And we'll come to that again in a bit. Unfortunately, I don't think this game was ever a massive success either. Again, we'll come to that in a bit. So it seems like one of those ideas they wanted to get right and never kind of got right. yes, Lock and Chase. I've shown off the trivia about the Japanese version of Lock and Trace on here before. This game, one thing I'm going to look at is there's basically a port of it to the PC Engine, of all things. I don't know about the NES, but there's definitely a PC Engine port of this, under a completely different name. And I will look at that. Maybe I'll look at that next before looking at the other versions of the arcade. And it was done by Data East too, so it's definitely an official Data East thing. Now you can press up to move up in this version. I'm sure it said press up to accelerate the pattern, but you can move up. No, you press button 1 to move the pattern back up. Sorry, that buys you a bit more time, and you can move up to move up. Okay, yeah. So I've not been moving up much, but I did have a bit more control than I realised. And you got a limited number of times you can move it up by the up arrow by the next to the pattern counter there. Anyway, you're clearing the patterns, and it's not endless, as you've seen. Each pattern is predefined, and once you've cleared it, you move on to the next one. I'm going to play this credit and then move on to the next game. But I will be back on this after that, but a different version of this. As long as you don't hit the bricks, you should be fine. There we go. Break that off the chain, break that off. That's a big bonus for breaking loads off at once. So that's very Puzzle Bobble-like too. The more you clear at once, the more that drop off at once, the bigger bonus you get. But this is way before Puzzle Bobble. They're fairly generic sounds, aren't they? I'm not really sure about Starblade. I don't know if Kiki Kai had a port under a different name on the snares. I've got to do some SNES research actually, because it's one area of knowledge I'm not that good with. I looked at that all SNES game video earlier and realised it was 4 hours long and I wasn't going to watch the whole thing. But okay, if we go to the PC Engine, we've got this game by Data East. Pocky and Rocky. Alright. So, this has got a whole story. This is Drop Rock Hora. Anyway, it's a story. I don't know why this game needs a story, but it's a story. You can instantly see the sprite there. Looks very familiar. Now this came out in 1990. This is a good 7-8 years after the game we just looked at. But, you know. I guess you could call it a sequel. If that's what you mean. I don't need to put that. But as you can see, this is basically the same gameplay. Well, this whole concept of again, that looks like something you pick up. Don't pick it up; it kills you. Oh, you're talking about Pock and Rocky. Okay, but yeah, I guess you could consider this a sequel too. I mean, it's obviously a much more modern looking version of the game, but it does have the exact same style of gameplay. So again, somebody at Data East must have really liked this concept to decide they wanted to bring it out so many years later on the PC Engine. It's obviously much faster, much smoother, but you cannot deny it is the same game. It's got the exact same mechanics of swapping between, you know, the different angles to fire the ball off at. So it does seem a bit trickier. Or maybe I'm just playing it badly. But I don't know. Maybe I skipped to this one too early. But we'll be looking at a few more games like this. It's one of the things I find really curious about the cassette system actually is some of these games that ended up being something else somewhere else. I can't imagine this is a PC Engine game many people play either. It's one I rarely see anybody talk about or mention in terms of Arkanoid clones or puzzle games or anything. And it is quite primitive for a PC Engine game. But it's definitely a port of that DECO cassette game. So this is one of the reasons I want to do this stream actually, so that I could bring this thing up. And I died. Fortunately, it is also quite difficult. It's got a continue feature. It's got credits. Almost as if Data East wanted this to be an arcade game. You see this with a few PC Engine games. They're designed like arcade games. Power Soul Stars is another with a credit system. So maybe somewhere in the pipeline this was destined for an arcade release and it just never happened. Wouldn't surprise me. But what else do we have related to this then? So we have the Japanese version, which was actually called Graplop. The set name of the parent set should probably be changed because it doesn't actually have Graplop as the title screen. But this one has a more complete title screen and a different graphical theme. I'm just speeding through it to get back to the title screen. But they are failing to, but you know. So the game had been changed by this point. I'm still hitting things I shouldn't be hitting. They do look like power-up, unfortunately. And now you can see this actually is a bit more like the game we just looked at. The wall at the bottom is no longer a wall. It's a single bar that changes colour when it gets hit, and you can't let it get hit too many times, I think. Or, you know, when it gets hit, bad things happen. So even though this is technically the same game, it's changed, it's different. They've already tried to rework the idea a bit. The level structure is much more complex. So this has the same game ID number, as far as Data East were concerned, for the cassette and the dongle and everything else. But clearly they've already decided they wanted to do things a bit differently for this release versus the US release we've got. I don't know which came first. This seems like a later version, even though it's the Japanese version. But again, there were a lot of revisions on cassette system, and many of them probably going to be lost forever, just because fragile media and everything else. Oh look, there's a little Burger Time guy with his little trolley that says 2001. There we go, pattern 1 clear. So again, bit of a different status screen. And again, we've got a different theme on the second level. This is a bit faster as well, I noticed. You get less time to react to things. So it's a very different game to the parent set, but Data East did consider it the same game in this case. Yeah, Data East loved their cameos as well. That's one of again, one of the charming things they always did. They would always have Karnov appearing randomly in games or on posters or as boss, you know, as bosses or as. I think Data East do deserve a lot more credit than they get. Yeah, they had some bad rip-off games. Some rip-off games that weren't as bad as people make out. I mean, Fighters History is a great game. I don't know why people hate it as much. Things like Backfire are just really bad copies of World Rally. But not every game's a hit. So anyway, let's just complete a level of credit into this one, because there's another version of this I have to look at afterwards. Yes, as I say, Data East seemed to really like this concept and wanted it to go somewhere. There's a clear amount of effort being put into it. Now, I'm gonna detour somewhere else slightly afterwards. But, can we get these to the bottom without dying? We can clear the pattern that way, yeah. So, this is Graplop. Now, I'm going to quit this now and quickly look at something else. Our friend the Neo Geo. This game never got released. It also seems to have the copyright text hacks out of it for some reason, but there you go. I wish they hadn't closed the PS3 stores. Luckily, it does sound like the game updates are still going to be downloaded for a while, because once the game updates go and the ability to validate things online goes, that's going to be a mess. But anyway, this is Graplop on the Neo Geo. Ghostlop on the Neo Geo. Ghostlop, Graplop, similar titles. They put Data East as part of the title up here, which they did for a few games. Now, I really like this. This should have got released. It's one of those Halloween games for a Halloween stream as well. It's got a whole story. Now, in this case, you change the colour of the ball between red and blue. But, you know, it seems to be kind of related. You're hitting balls and you're causing things to drop off. You see the connection? Gameplay might have been reworked a bit to be a bit more puzzle bubble like. But yeah, this is clearly related to the Graplop games. But it's also got a bit of the Ikaruga with the colour changing mechanic for the ball. Which, I mean, when you press one button to make the ball orange, one button to make the ball blue, to chain different attacks. But it's clearly an evolution of that same piece dropping when it gets hit by a ball mechanic and trying to knock pieces off. And I can't understand for the life of me why this didn't get released, because this is a really good game. You know, this would be in my top 10 Neo Geo games. Not meaning I'm good at it, but it's just a really good, fun game. But anyway, I don't want to spend too long on that, because, as I say, the focus of the stream isn't the Neo Geo games. But that is clearly connected to this series of games. Now, let's have a look at this set. This is the other set of Graplop. This one, I think, has got a slightly different presentation again. Yeah, yin yang mechanic. So, again, you've got different presentation here. You've got a beach ball type look this time. And this one doesn't have a title screen, you see. You let the attract mode run, there's no title screen. And that's probably because this is a prototype. You seem to have an infinite shield button. You know, I can press this button and nothing will kill me. So, you know, this clearly isn't a released version of the game, because this would have been installed in generic cabinets with 2 buttons, and if you hold down button 2, you can't die. So this appears to be a very early US version, which suggests these games were trialled in the US rather than in Japan. Because a lot of the US versions we have actually seem earlier versions than the Japanese versions. And we've got more US versions than Japanese versions. But that's why I think it's important to get a lot of the Japanese ones dumped, because I think they're probably the later refined versions of maybe the ones that went to Japan in some cases. But yeah, once you're holding down button 2, you cannot die in this. This is clearly some kind of prototype version, which is why it's marked as a possible prototype. But again, the graphic thing's different. You're a beach ball, and yeah, you don't have the whole swap angles to hit the ball at, which is a key mechanic in how the game's meant to work, because otherwise you really have very little control over where you aim. And the music's slightly more random, I think. So, what was going on with the development of this game? You know, you've got all the sets of this game are completely different, and then it influenced other games on the PC Engine, and it clearly influenced the unreleased Ghostlop. And do you think that's where the story ends? Because while those were all game 28, Graplop Cluster Buster, if we scroll down the list a bit, we get to something else. If I'm going to load the right game here. Game 35. Flyball. Corruption is normal. It doesn't have enough memory, so it loads the new graphics over the ones it's using for the display. Flying Ball, 84. Data East. Does this look familiar? There are a lot of Data East cassettes, but this is considered a separate game. This was released afterwards with a new title and new cassette number. You've got your red and blue mechanic rather than a different style of balls, which is actually less intuitive. And you've got a background. And the wall's back at the bottom, where you're breaking the wall. So I don't know if that indicates that was a newer mechanic or an older mechanic. The PC Engine game doesn't have the wall. But yeah, this is the same basic game, but with more sound and music and different presentation. Yeah, I think that's what they must have thought. Somebody at Data East really liked this concept. They just kept trying to redo it in different ways, and I think just hoping one of those ways would be a success. I don't think it ever was. But again, it's one of the reasons I find the cassette system to be fascinating. Because I guess it was cheap enough to do this. So, and this is the last one of these games I'll be looking at. You'll probably be happy to hear. I don't think there's any more of the story, unless it was ported to like the NES and SNES as well. I've not really looked. I only know of the PC Engine game. So, yeah, obviously the graphics are significantly upgraded in this version. Same hardware, but they've gone for a lot more colourful with the backgrounds and more detailed sprites. And I don't think it's the best version of the game. I don't like the patterns as much. But it is still clearly the same concept. So I'm going to play it a little bit, and then I will move on. Wasn't very good, was it? It's still using the same hardware, yes. So it's a standard platform. So, you know, DECO 222 is just a custom 6502, I believe. And the other one, you know, the sub CPU for sound. And then the MCU for the cassette tape. Well, yeah, this is Flying Ball. Anyway, I'm going to move on because I think we've seen enough of Graplop and its variations. Let's go for Skater. Skater, or... well, I don't know. It's very difficult to read that title, isn't it? Scatter. Or... yeah, you've got your... you can make your clown powerful. Making clowns powerful is a bad idea. And you've got your springy dog, your monkey, your ball that looks like it came out of that Graplop prototype, and other things. So this one is from 83. Nice smooth animation on the main character there. I believe I am terrible at this, but we will see. We present you course 1. Now let's start. So don't hit the size. Nope. You can speed up a bit. So it's a bit like a skiing game but on skates. Slalom game type of thing. Oh, don't hit those. And there we go. You have a hit counter if you hit too many things. You know, you don't do very well. hit by something that you're not allowed to get hit by at all. I hit the side. It gets quite tricky quite quickly. Don't hit the sides. That's a general tip. Now, I'm not sure why you're a giant clown on, you know, skate stilts, but please spell by using a red button and a lever within 35 counts. 55 counts. Okay, what? So you draw your name? Okay. That's a bit different, isn't it? You can erase with the other button, I think. Or can you not? Maybe I couldn't. See, is the second button not mixed up? Apparently the second button is hooked up, but I couldn't work out how to erase. So yes, you draw your initials. How many games in 83 let you draw your initials? I can't think of many. I mean, usually for good reason, because people draw things they're not meant to draw. This is an enjoyable game. This is really underrated. And it's fast and smooth, which is actually quite rare for the DECO Cassette games. And pleasant music. Now, as far as I know, this was not released outside the cassette system. I've not even seen a bootleg of it outside the cassette system. Oh, apparently got a power-up which lets me just go and stomp things. Oh, I got hit by the boots though. Now, yeah, but I must be a very, very big clown, because look, I think these are houses. Very considerate clown though, I don't want to stomp on people's houses. I would like to finish course 2 though, if possible. Yes, Quantum did. That's one of the few I can think of. And obviously Quantum's drawing was a bit more elaborate because you had the trackball. But this is a joystick-based game which lets you draw a name into basically the space where you would usually write a name. Again, I think DECO were just trying out ideas. Oh dear. I can't recall ever seeing anybody play this one on stream. I'm sure like BBH has done on his main roulette, but I've just not seen the episode where he did. Other than that, this just gets completely overlooked. So if I do you know, another episode of this on overlooked games that I really enjoy, this one will likely feature. There we go. If you manage to go over the boots, you get the power up. There we go. I actually did it correct this time. Once you get your timing down, it becomes much easier. Nope, got it wrong. Yeah, Quantum is a great game though. I mean, I love Quantum. Quantum is one of those draw circles around things games. It's a similar game on DECO Cassette actually, where you're drawing boxes around things. Maybe it's the one I'll look at next actually. Not as good as Quantum, nowhere near as good as Quantum, but... Get your timing slightly wrong though, and this, you do lose your life very quickly. There we go. And you can't extend your legs when you're there because it's too narrow. A happy start of UK fiscal year. Yes, taxes and all that stuff. Let's just draw lots of dots. There we go. Thank you very much. We hope you will come and enjoy this game again. I will enjoy this game again. I'll play one more credit of this game. We are already on 1 hour and 22 minutes. Would you believe it? I hardly covered any of the games. I might end up splitting this into 2 streams or 3 streams or who knows how many streams. I don't know. I guess some of the games aren't quite as interesting, like Lucky Poker. Not getting those. And hello Bob, thank you for joining once again. Yeah, it's a shame. It's one of the things I thought when I was looking and thinking what should I do for a stream, it was these. I mean, I see all sorts of best of lists for like Neo Geo and Capcom CPS, but I don't think many people, at least not mainstream, have done best of DECO Cassette. Yet it's a big platform. Maybe if all the games were dumped, people would be more inclined to. Oh dear, I'm playing really badly this time. I think this credit's not going to last as long as the last one. I could say that about DECO East in general. So it's very easy to take the opinion that they didn't do much original, but this seems original. I mean, at least to me. I don't know much else like this. A clown skating across a golf course. I made the same mistake again. But yes. I've seen them, but they're just home games on a timer, and those systems aren't very interesting to me, Scott, the MaxiFlex ones. They've got bristles on them. There's a Boulder Dash on there as well, isn't there? But they're not real arcade games. They've not been adapted for arcade use. They've just been had a timer slapped on them. So I tend to just overlook them. Right. Let's have a look at Sweetheart, also known in Japan as Disco Number 1, and outside of the cassette system as Disco Number 1. And the Sweetheart title was only used on the cassette system, and again, this might be because this is an earlier version, I don't know. No, I mean, I don't mind you asking about the MaxiFlex games, it's just they're a little bit uninspiring to me. I mean, it's like there's some PC Engine systems that are the same. The one that Keith Collision Alpha Zone runs on is, again, it's just a PC Engine on a timer. The Tour Vision is a bit more interesting, even though it's a bootleg system, because the BIOS is coded with specific inputs to get the games in game. But yeah, MaxiFlex is literally just the Atari games with a timer hooked onto them. Anyway, this is Disco Number 1, which is one of those draw shapes around things games, because Quantum was mentioned earlier, and it's kind of what you're doing here, isn't it? It's meant to be some sort of nightclub, and lots of music going on, and you're drawing these hearts around people, and this person's trying to clean up your lines. What was the first game with this mechanic? I don't know. And this was certainly an early one. I think, I mean, Namco had Toy Pop, which was a dual joystick thing where you were drawing lines around... Not Toy Pop, that's it. Libble Rabble. Sorry, Libble Rabble. Toy Pop was on the same hardware. I think Libble Rabble was 83. This is 82, so this probably came first. Before that... you press your dance button, you get lots of background patterns that end up looking like one of those NES dance mats. But no, I don't know the exact first game that used this mechanic. I'd have to research that. I mean, you've got things like kicks that aren't the same mechanic but still have you drawing shapes. So I don't know if you count that. Again, everything's sort of an evolution of some other idea taken to another level, done slightly differently. Yeah, I'd be curious to know what the first game you can find like this. Oh, the sprites are from another DECO game. I don't know what sprite they're from, but yeah, I'd be curious to know. Yeah, I mean, Kicks from 81, if you consider Kicks to be the same type of thing, I mean, Kicks is a bit different. You are drawing from the edges and not really surrounding things in the same way, although if you surround the enemies, you know, if you cut off the enemies with your lines, it does, you know, clear them out, you get bonus points for them, so there are some elements that are the same. When was Quantum released? Because Quantum obviously is this kind of thing with the trackball. So it's possible Quantum was earlier. I don't know. I've not got the dates at hand. I've not played Double Back. I'll add it to my list of ones to play, Super Low Pursuit. I'm always interested in finding games that are similar to other games. Somebody mentioned Willow Pattern, was it, in the chat the other day, and I checked that out earlier, and I was surprised to find I never played Willow Pattern before, and I was very surprised to find out it is basically the same game, or a more refined version of Treasure Island. As soon as I fired it up, I go, I thought, this is Treasure Island. You know, the actual mazy bit of Treasure Island, not the ridiculously unfair first part where you usually lose all your life before you even got to the game. But Quantum also 82. So I guess this kind of idea was in a lot of people's heads around that time. You'd probably sort of have to look at the months or try and find something that's genuinely early. I mean, personally, I don't feel Kicks is quite the same game. This is more freeform than Kicks. Yeah, this was also known as Disco Number 1. This is a different version of Disco Number 1. The Japanese version on the cassette system is still called Disco Number 1. I'll probably swap over that in a minute anyway. But yeah, this is one of the games that did have a non-cassette release. Yeah, this is also isn't this some of the music that got used in some version of Pengo? But yeah, Sweetheart Number 1 is the US release on the cassette system. But there was also Disco Number 1 on the cassette system and Disco Number 1 outside of the cassette system. So I'll just load that briefly. What's the cassette name? So yeah. So yeah, it's basically the same game. I'm just trying to skip back to the title screen, but there we go. See, this is Disco Number 1 version. We can cut it up. I don't know if this changes much. I mean, it's got the barriers at the bottom for a start. Those weren't there on the Sweetheart version. I'm not sure if they're there on the non-cassette versions or if they're only there on this cassette version, or if it's a difficulty dip switch thing for this version. Again, it shows the versions you got in the different territories were quite different. New ideas, things have been changed around, things have been rebalanced. Yeah, Mikey. Mikey is the classroom student one. I looked at Mikey, and I looked at the different version of Mikey a few weeks ago, and it was pointed out actually that the original Japanese version isn't even set in a school. It's more of an office worker training block. So while we all know it as like the school setting, the original setting was sort of adult education. Which I found to be curious. I think that might be why there's also the high school graffiti version or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. The high school graffiti version is the one that takes away the headbutts and has you shouting. But yeah, Disco number 1 seems to be a slightly different version of it, and as I mentioned, there's also several versions of Disco number 1 that aren't on cassette system. So this version doesn't have the barriers at the start. There's a second set. It also doesn't have the barriers at the start. Now this, when you do the special move, the non-cassette versions don't have the background pattern, they just do a colour cycle like this. So the cassette versions have a little bit more going on in that sense. But again, the game changed quite a bit between the different versions, and it's something you saw a fair bit with these cassette games versus the non-cassette games. Shall we go with a Treasure Island, I think. Treasure Island, this is a US version. Again, this got a non-cassette release, but the non-cassette release either got some bad ROMs dumps or some very strange exceptions to how the encryption works in places. Hey Mass Ninja, thank you for joining. How you doing? But Treasure Island is your isometric sinking island game. So it's a little bit Congo Bongo-y. From 81 though. It might have been before Congo Bongo. I'm not sure. But Congo Bongo is Sega's 3D isometric Donkey Kong ripoff. Yeah, here we go. Again, this is one where the colours are a little bit ugly, but they are confirmed as correct. Mr. Little Explorer guy in his boat, waiting for me to restart. And, you know, it's cubity as well, isn't it? But you can only follow the paths you have. So it's got a maze game aspect to it. As you're trying to get up here and not get killed. You can throw rocks down. You can use the secret tunnels at times. But, it's quite a tricky game too. But yeah, this looks better if you force the background to be like black, because then the doors stand out. But we know again that the background's not meant to be black on this version. It is meant to be like this, the same colour as the doors, which looks a bit off, but that is a choice that was made. And I've forgotten how to play this, as you can see. But then on the game over screen, it turns black, and it kind of looks like that. Also, this is a really strange high score entry name. Entry list. We had the draw your own, and now we've got a very odd way of scrolling them. Congo Bongo was later than this, then, yeah. There's a report on MAME testers which suggests that the Shinobi issues have been fixed since 2.30. Although the report still says there might be some issues with the symbols, but the person reporting that does need to check if that's actually related to the sound emulation of the YM chips, or if that's something that's to do with the filters on 16B, because the filters will make things like symbols sound different, and the filters do exist on the 16B hardware. 16B hardware had a distinctively different sound because of the filters, in fact. So yeah, I'm thinking of doing an isometric stream at some point, and this would be one of the games I cover, although I don't remember being this bad at it before. Here we go, almost getting to the top. Almost. But this is Treasure Island, and it's funny I mentioned Treasure Island in terms of the Spectrum game earlier, but this is completely unrelated to the Spectrum game Treasure Island, and therefore completely unrelated to that willow pattern, which I actually had quite a bit of fun with. I'm glad somebody mentioned that in the chat the other day. Come on. Get the lamp. This isn't too bad, is it? It's well executed. You throw your rocks down and knock the treasure monkeys off the slopes. And it scrolls. And I still got caught. There were definitely issues in 230 that Alan fixed. If you look at the report, he will acknowledge that he fixed some issues. But they should be better now. I mean, the problem with 230 is Aaron did something that I'm sure every program has done from time to time, and that is put some optimizations in at the last minute and then found out the optimizations broke a few things. I'm actually more concerned about the missing gun sounds on Terminator 2 Arcade on the Mega Drive, but they've never been present, so I also wonder if that's an issue with the Mega Drive emulation rather than an issue with anything to do with the sound. You know, the YM chips, but we'll see. I guess, you know, I did also find that there's no sound in Pac-Man 2, and that is definitely an emulation issue with my Genesis emulation, because it tries to write some of the Z80 data without the bus, and therefore doesn't properly upload the sound program. But Terminator 2 Arcade game's not spamming anything in the logs about invalid bus accesses, so I do wonder what's going on there. Oh, where are we going? No. So close. There we go. Pattern 2 complete. And then on to pattern 3. But yeah, this is alright. Again, there aren't any games that are exactly like this. You can go through the doors to have a chance of going a bit higher up in the pyramids. It can be a bit frustrating the direction you throw things in at times. And the presentation's a little off, but pardon me. It's a good fun game. And the cassette version works well. The non-cassette version does have issues that are either bad dump or protection related. Now, it's also quite a curious one because we have a set that requires the BIOS of a different region to any of the others. So we've got the US BIOS, we've got the Japanese BIOS, but this set requires a region code D, which nothing else requires. That's very strange because I think all the cassettes that were dumped at the time were sourced in the US. But this one requires a different BIOS. It seems to play the same. I don't think there's any notable differences in the actual game version. I've not noticed any between the different Treasure Island versions. But it does require a different set. Maybe I fell off the pyramid already. I mean, there's always a risk. There's so many things to test with the YM chips. And there's always that pressure not to ruin the performance. In fact, this seems to be a different level layout. So maybe this version is more different than I realised. Or I'm just imagining it. Or maybe it's not, I don't know. Maybe it's not. But yeah, the YM changes do improve a lot of things. It's just a bit of a shame that a last minute issue was introduced, but it happens. I'll always say with MAME, the version after a major feature update is probably the version that works, because as good as we try to test things, some will slip through the cracks, and then once people are testing them, and it's important people do test them, it's important people try the new version, test things, report bugs, they get fixed, and the version after that tends to be the most solid one for that feature. But that was Treasure Island. It's an enjoyable little game. Be nice to fix the non-cassette version, but the problems with that seem difficult, let's just say. Let's put on something not so good, but something that is worth talking about. Right, this is Pro Soccer. Let's speed up the loading. It's not a very good soccer game. I mean, I'm not going to play this for long because it's pretty bad. Let's be fair. There you go. That looked more like basketball. But, now, what the point I wanted to make with this one is, If you look at the radar, there are little lines that show where the players are, and an arrow. But this is a horrible game. I think I was being kind. Now you see the arrow, you can see the little sticks where the players are, which appear, I think they're bullet sprites maybe. They are about the same size and shape as a bullet sprite would be. No goal. Apparently not scoring a goal takes you back to the centre circle. I'm sure that's how football works. I mean, enemy ball. This is a very strange football game that plays nothing like football. In fact, it plays more like American football with a football. And now it's game over because I lost the ball twice? No, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think the Japanese version is any different. I'll load it up just in case, just in case. So it looks about the same to me. I can pass the ball around. Yeah, enemy ball, so I guess I lose a life. Look, the game counter will go down. I've lost a life for losing the ball. You know, it's an odd game with terrible scrolling, and honestly, I can't see why anybody would ever want to play this. And they cleared the ball, and it's enemy ball. Yeah, it's not good. Now, what I wanted to point out though, it did have a release on the not on cassette system. So, in this version, the radar does not show any lines where the players are. It also runs a bit faster because I think it's better hardware. But there's an arrow, but there's no lines for the players. So I am wondering if this type is missing some bullet emulation or something like that, if there's a priority glitch, because I think the radar lines are probably important, but it could also just be that it's not in this version. Also, I really don't know if this version is meant to run faster, if this hardware's just got clocks that are too high, because in this case it's a DECO 16, which is a custom Data East modified processor, and it seems to be clocked higher, which obviously directly impacts how fast the game runs. It's still the same absolutely hopelessly bad football game that I don't want to waste any time playing, to be fair on it. So yes, there's also Scum Try, which I imagine plays quite similar, because that didn't feel like a football game. That felt like an American football game that had been hacked into a football game by somebody who's never watched a match of football. And I don't know that much about football, but I know it doesn't play like that. Let's play one I like. Zeroize. Now this one's one where I don't think the protection dongle was ever dumped, but the workaround for it's very odd because it doesn't seem to do much. Now I am planning on making this stream between, I'd say, 2 and 2.5 hours. Not a full 3-hour one. But this is Zeroize. It kind of reminds me of Amori's Car Jamboree and a bit of some Namco games. I mean, we looked at Motos, which again was pushing things off a grid. In this case, you're trying to ram other cars into traps, into holes. And this is another very good cassette system game. Although, you know, if you get rammed, you... Have I done a terrible MAME game stream? Most of my streams are terrible. No, I know what you mean. I've not done one that's specifically terrible games yet, no. There are some terrible games. With arcades, the location testing process tended to mean a lot of what could have potentially been terrible games didn't get released. But yeah, I do want to focus on games I think I've forgotten how to play this game. Yeah, usually a good idea is to skip ones that run emulated protection, unless you know specifically what's wrong and that it's not going to impact you at all. With the console stuff, there are a lot of things that are marked as red for the console, but the individual games tend to work okay. Oh dear, I'm playing this quite badly. Now apparently lives are shown as remainder here, which is an odd way to express lives, but lives remaining. Okay, I keep getting hit into the traps. I am good at this game, honestly. Oh yeah, that's it. You have to hold the button to grip again. I forgot one of the key mechanics, which is to hold the button to restore your grip. Yeah, once you remember that, it's a lot easier. So the second button basically tries to grip you in place so you don't go spinning off somewhere. I thought I was missing something. But you know, it's got that sort of Robot Wars feel, hasn't it? Battling cars in an arena, Destruction Derby, whatever you want to call it. I do like this kind of game. I've got a big one. I think I have to hit things into. There we go. Oh, hey Santor, thank you for joining and I hope you're doing well. And thank you for the compliment on the stream. But yeah, this is one of the fun cassette system games with smooth animation, good frame rate, and a bit of a challenge between levels to get this bonus thing, get the bonus thing. I don't know what the bonus thing is, but it looks like we're going with Namco's Frozen now, the chemical atoms and everything else. But I don't know. There we go. I got 6 bits. Not enough to make a ZX Spectrum. Try! Exclamation mark. Next round. And we've got a slightly different theme. Probably a quite ugly background to be honest, but some of the things are more difficult to ram than others. So the strategy of ramming one thing into another is a good one. Some of them will hit you harder and cause you to fly off. Yeah, I think Data East did use the hardware well. Some games are a bit slow, and we'll probably look at one in a minute, where it's a much better game if you overclock the CPUs. But if you like this, also have a look at Car Jamboree, which is not a cassette system game, but it's good fun. It's got a similar ramming things off mechanic. It's another one I'll probably look at in another stream. Yeah, if this had been a Namco game on Namco hardware, I think people would have considered it to be a good game. It just seems to get overlooked because it's a Data East game on Data East cassette hardware. And for some reason people just associate cassette hardware with games that aren't worthwhile when there's plenty of really good ones. And Motus, yeah, Motus, I mentioned Motus I think. I really like Motus. Motus also has one of the best home to arcade ports in my opinion, the CPC port of it. It's up there with the CPC port of Donkey Kong, which if you've not played, you really should. This ball is doing me no good. There we go. What do you quickly? There, that's that round done. Yeah, Fozon's one I should cover. I'll probably play Motus again. I play Motus a bit. I really enjoy Motus. Now Namco do have a lot of really underrated games too. Dig Dug 2, nobody seems to care about, and I prefer it over Dig Dug. Say Motos, Fozon. I think because they produce so many good games, they get overlooked. Especially the early 8-bit ones. And they're games that usually require a bit of thinking too. And I don't know, maybe thinking and arcade games don't go together. I only got 5 hits this time. Pac-Man probably succeeded because it didn't have that much thinking, and then Namco were trying to do things that required a bit more thought, and I don't know. I can only theorise. It's just a shame some of these games do seem to be almost left behind. They're not on a lot of the classic re-releases. Even Hopping Mappy I think is a great sequel. There we go. I didn't realise I could teleport through that. I got a bit confused there. I've never tried to drive into those before. Gaplop as well is a really good sequel to Gallagher. Or Gallagher 3 as it's sometimes known. I'm getting bounced in and out of the teleporter garage. There we go. Nope, you push me to the side. An official NES remake, so that's along the same lines as the Pac-Man Championship Edition that I looked at on a previous stream, is it? The DECO cassettes weren't standard cassette tapes. I don't have one ready to show you, but they're a bit different. You can't just read them like a standard audio tape or anything else. I know the NES remake of Pac-Man Championship Edition was originally some Japanese homebrew, wasn't it, that apparently got picked up by Namco. So I don't know what the case is for Gaplop, but I've not seen that one. I'll have to have a look at it because I wasn't aware of it. So thank you for letting me know. I'll have to also see if it runs in MAME and maybe give it a bit of coverage if it does. But obviously not add it to the software list because it's a bit new, and we tend to, if something's still being sold commercially, tend to not add them. This is Rootin Tootin, also known as La Papa. I think this is the set that does show Rootin Tootin, the track mode. One of them just shows La Papa from memory, or was it the other way around? Rootin Tootin there and La Papa there. So, you've got two types. You've got La Papa on this screen, you've got Rootin Tootin on the other one. And if I go the other set briefly, just to show, I'll play this set. The clone set has Rootin Tootin there and Rootin Tootin there, and has a different background colour. Again, this is what I mean by they vary the background colours up. One of the sets had the blue background, this has the black background. Clearly there was some indecision over what colour they wanted the background. It's probably a lot clearer with this background. But this does have a lot of slowdowns, you're already seeing. It's a Pac-Man game, it's a maze game, it's one that might be on my maze streams. The trick here is that as you pick up the dots, they fire across the screen. So if you're clever about it, you can aim them at things, and you've got your shield transparency thing. And so you can try and get on the other side of the dots and have a look at them. And fire them at the enemy. And you can pick up things that are slightly outside the playfield. For a game that's meant to be musical themed, the music is really bad, unfortunately. But it's actually a solid maze game, this one. And again, the twist on the concept of killing the enemies works. It's a shame about the slowdown. There we go, you turn around, you got those. escalating scale. Yeah, when you pick stuff up. It does. I'm guessing this came after Mr. Do. This is an 83 game. I think there are more games that have that escalating scale as you pick things up, but yeah, Mr. Do is probably the most famous one for it. I guess it makes sense in this game though, because this is musical themed, that they would try and do that. Now, there are also notes in places you can't go where you just have to face them to pick them up like this. Yeah, the actual music just seems to be almost random noise. It's disappointing on the terms of music. If you can put up with the music, there is a solid game here. And also this clone is far more enjoyable with the black background. I'll put the other one back on briefly in a bit, but you'll see what I mean. It's strange, that whole... Oh, and they drop bombs that you will kill you. That decision between blue background and black backgrounds, or other coloured backgrounds, seems to be something that happened in so many games early on. Yeah, the sound's properly emulated, it just sounds awful. It's not good sound on that game, but it's I mean, the sound hardware is your standard AY chips that are well emulated. Now I'm going to put the other set back on. But this one's got... It's not even a blue background on this case. This has got a very garish green background. Now, I guess the green background makes some things stand out a bit more, but it's not good on the eyes. I didn't know this was on the C64. That surprises me. Is that a port from back in the day, or is that a recent port? Because this seems like a really obscure game to port to anything. But again, thank you for the trivia there. The C64 version of this is something I will have to check out. The green background makes the notes sound better. Well, I mean, it's overloading sensors in other ways. Maybe I can hack it so the background flashes random colours and everything will seem amazing. Probably not. I think it's a solid game concept. It just needed more work. Again, I don't think there are any other games that play exactly like this. It is a maze game. It is Pac-Man-y. But it's got its own little hook. And as I've said before, there's those little hooks that I look for in games. If you overclock this, it runs a lot better too, but we know the clock speeds of the hardware. Oh, it's a fan-made port. Okay, but that's still interesting. I mean, I still like to hear about fan-made ports. It's interesting because obviously somebody really liked this game other than me. I mean, yeah, okay, this isn't my favourite DECO Cassette game, but again, I think it's a good game. It's got its issues, especially the slowdown and the music and the choice of colours in this version. But yeah, it's still a decent game, which plays well. But yeah, I'm not surprised it wasn't ported back in the day, because it must have been incredible. It was an official port. Okay, that does surprise me then. I mean, I guess it must have washed up on the shore somewhere and somebody played it and thought, I want to do a port of that. That's a really good idea. And it is a good idea. It's just not that well executed. Maybe the C64 version is better. That wouldn't surprise me. That would not surprise me at all in this case. But Guitaricu, Madphone, Simbom, Guitaroo, Trian, and Piano. Like Piranha, but a piano. Yes, I see what you've done there. It's all right. I kind of play it. I can enjoy it. It hurts my ears after a while, but that's okay. Now, Burning Rubber, Bump and Jump. Let's have a look at that one. There are quite a few versions of that. I'm going to start with the oldest version, or what seems to be the oldest version. And again, this sort of goes hand in hand with what I was saying about, I think DataEast sort of developed games and released them as they were in development on this platform. So for the Japanese version of Burning Rubber, which uses the title Burning Rubber, we have this very, very plain title screen. Just the game name in white, with the text in white. It's all white, and then you've got your high scores. Let's play it a little bit. All right, Scott, thank you for joining. Take care. And I know what you mean. It's always good to have a chat with you, and you know you provided some interesting information and things for me to check out later. Again, as always. So yeah, it's always good. Thank you, and I'll see you on Reddit. But yeah, Bump and Jump, Burning Rubber is obviously one of the more famous games. One of the ones that almost DataEast are known for, and lots of people copied this idea. This was copied by many. We looked at Capcom's LED Storm and Mad Gear. There was the Eastern Corporation Alpha, Kiso or whatever it's called, which copied this basic idea. There's so many. Pardon me. But yeah, this is clearly an early version of it with a very plain title screen. But it's all about getting, you know, again, it's a car collision game, a bit like Zeroize, but this time it's a full-on vertical scrolling one. And you can jump on cars, hence Bump and Jump. In the title that I think Bump and Jump was a later title that they settled on for some regions. Burning Rubber doesn't really tell you much about the game. Burning Rubber makes it sound more about speed than crashing. But yeah. Flashes jump okay when you're allowed to jump. Because your jump has to recharge so you don't overuse it. Which is fair enough, you know. There we go. I smashed 33 cars. That car looks like it's got a piano on the front. Got those little engine animations in the car too. I mean, again, I say charm a lot in games and when I'm talking about these arcade games, but the way this is presented does have a fair bit of charm. Now, this was the early version. If I change to, you see the very plain title screen there. This is another one where there are multiple versions that I'm going to give a credit on in each. This one is a US set, it requires the US BIOS. And this one still has the very plain title screen. But if we go with the parent set, you see it's got a red Burning Rubber title screen. It's more stylish. So let's give this one a credit. And this has got the engine sound that seemed to be missing in the other set, so I think this is a later version where they've added things like the engine sound, they've redone the title screen. Again, it almost suggests that the one with the very plain logo is a much earlier version. And like I said, that's one of the things with the cassette system. There seem to be early versions of the games on it. And it's why I hope, you know, a lot more of these cassettes are dumped, because we see some of them that seem to be marked as a version G or so, and yet there's only one dump. So there are obviously loads of cassettes out there, or were loads of cassettes out there that just aren't dumped. And that is a real shame. Even of the games that are dumped, there are going to be probably 2 or 3 versions of each game that still aren't. And you know, that's not even considering possible region variations, because that Treasure Island set had a different region code to any of the others. It could be a European region, so maybe this thing was also in Europe with a different region code, and in that case we've only got one dump of a set with that region. This also seems tricky, but that might be just my play. Come on. The dongles were quite tricky because there were different ones. Some of them are ROMs, so if you've got to dump the ROM inside of them. Other ones are quite complex encryption schemes that are state-based, so how 1 byte decrypts depends on the previous one, and you've got to do that all while loading it. And yeah, they're not simple protections at all. One or two are. I mean, Zeroize, the dongle wasn't dumped; it just seems to check a fixed return value or something like that. Explorer, all the graphics are in the dongle. Other ones are loading encryptions. I mean, the driver source lists gives a rough overview of it, but you know, in the cases where there are undumped versions of existing games, we don't always know. But for any game that is completely undumped, there'll be a comment next to the game number with the game name. Not necessarily telling us what the game is going to be like, but just to know that there is a known game with that number that is undumped. But then, so there are all the mahjong and gambling ones that seem to have their own numbering scheme, possibly even their own biases, for all we know, where there aren't any of them dumped yet. You forget that this was a system from 1980. This is a really early arcade system, and cassette media is not built to last in that long. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if the more are going to show up or not. I hope they do, because there's some decent games in there. And there are ones we've seen videos of where Japanese collectors have uploaded videos and they're just don't want them to be public, as I mentioned before. So it just worries me. I mean, when you had the whole tsunami and earthquake in Japan, you're sort of wondering how much was lost in terms of arcade games during that. How many things for people keeping hold of, and arcades and basements that just got flooded and things destroyed because media like this isn't going to survive anything like that. So it's a bit of a worry that these things could potentially take games away. That's why one reason I like to see people, being more free with what they have, and acknowledging that, probably even Data East don't have access to most of the original source for this anymore. So if Data East, or whoever owns the IP these days, wanted to release some of this stuff, they're relying very much on them being emulated. It's a bit of a mess. Anyway, that was the US version with the different style title screen. The only other version of that of note is the one that's actually called Bump and Jump, which is another US version. Now, I'm guessing this is the newest US version, because by this point it's called Bump and Jump. They've changed the title, so they've gone from the very basic Burning Rubber logo to the stylized Burning Rubber logo, to changing the game name to Bump and Jump. And I think the non-cassette version was also called Bump and Jump, which is a much more logical name for the game. I don't think it plays any differently to the set we've just seen. But no, there you go. Again, you can track the evolution of the game through the cassette versions, which again makes the cassette system kind of fascinating. But I'm not going to play it too much because you've seen it anyway. Right. One that people asked about for a long time before it was actually dumped. For some reason, it seems to be one of the more famous cassette games. And that is Dangler, or in Japan it was just called Fishing. Because for some reason just calling something Fishing makes sense. I know it is a fishing game, but I think you want a better title. Dangler is quite a good punny name, really, isn't it? Bit of a wordplay. You know, I'm going to speed through it. Yeah, you've got a very basic title logo that I want to try and show. Probably it runs so fast when you unthrottle it. Time out. If you fish, there you go. Angler Dangler, written in a terrible font. And again, sometimes they're a bit lazy, but no, I can't remember how to play this. Yeah, it is surprising how anything works. Right, so you cast your line, and then yeah, you pull the line back. So it's an early fishing game. And considering how this is from '82, how many other fishing games were there back in '82? Because the fishing genre would actually end up becoming quite big, I seem to remember. So it's a bit like golf. Look, you've got your power bar on the map, and you've got somewhere you're meant to aim for, and obviously if you don't aim at all, it times out, as it did there while I was talking. Let's go there then. Let's go all the way up there. I've got this fish. Go, no, go that way, go that way, go that way. No, I'm going to lose the fish on the island, so I lost that fish. But yeah, I do worry about things, especially with the fragile formats. It's why I was glad to see. Oh no, I've lost that one in the box already. I was glad to see some of the magnet system. I'm glad to see the magnet system games jumped, although that's not what I was talking about. The Konami ones. What was the system? Bubble Memory. I was glad to see some of those dumped, even if it's still quite HLE based, and it's the data from the devices, but not a raw dump of the devices, sort of the error information, error blocks. But it's still, and the MCU is still not dumped, so the initial countdown doesn't speak to you, because I think the MCU probably does that. But it's still good to have the data from the bubble memory dumped in some form, even if it's HLE, because again that is super fragile. Yeah, I mean Zeroize did do their own rip-offs of Pac-Man. I mean, I've talked about the Lock and Chase Japanese version before, where they've basically stolen far too much from Pac-Man to the point that it got completely changed for outside of Japan. I might look at that again in a bit. I have talked about it on this previously. But yeah, Angler Dangler, it's a fishing game. Apparently this one was quite popular back in the day. Not especially my type of game, but I can see the appeal to it. So yeah, Lock and Chase is probably fairly close to a Pac-Man clone. This was also quite a popular game on non-cassette hardware. But the Lock and Chase, stiffy, smarty, scary, scaredy and silly. Observe the maze design. It's not very Pac-Man-like. The sound effects aren't very Pac-Man-like. The enemy characters don't look like ghosts. I have covered this before, so if you watch previous streams, you'll have seen this. And yeah, you lock doors behind you, so if you go through somewhere, you can always lock the door behind you, which is how you defend yourself against the enemies. It's actually a good fun game. It's not always obvious which doors are going to lock, unfortunately, which is probably the annoying part about it. But yeah, this got ported to things like the Intellivision, as you say. The Intellivision was interesting because it also got Dine, didn't it? The Burger Time sequel that was never an arcade game. Okay, I'm doing really bad at that. So that was the US version. The one I wanted to show was yes, Data East's most blatant infringements. It's the Japanese version of Lock and Chase, where suddenly the ghosts, they've got the same name, they look more like ghosts. They look like ghosts with suits on. They've still got those ghostly, bottomly, I guess they're chunkier legs, but they still look like ghost legs. I'm using a very, very cheap keyboard, not a joystick. Ingu. I do mostly development, so mostly keyboard. If I use a pad, I use the 360 Xbox One pad. Now notice the Japanese version. The ghosts or enemies start in a box in the center, just like Pac-Man. The sound effects for collecting dots are just like Pac-Man. Yeah. Now, I will defend Data East quite often, but in this case, this is far too much like Pac-Man in terms of certain visual and audio aspects of the game, let's just say. And I am not at all surprised they got changed. I don't know if they were forced to be changed. I've never read any kind of information about a lawsuit between Namco and Data East, or if Data East just realised, yeah, we probably can't do that. We can't use sounds that sound just like Pac-Man. We can't have enemies that look just like ghosts, because Namco will probably sue us. I should do a stream of ports, for example, the television version of this actually. Anyway, I'm playing this quite badly. But yeah, this is... Again, it's one of those interesting things about the cassette system. None of the non-cassette system versions have these sound effects or these graphics. So if you want to see the game looking like this, you have to play the Japanese version on the cassette system. Also, technically this is more of a maze game than Pac-Man because it has an exit. You have to go out of the maze. But there are original ideas, but when your sound effects are so Pac-Man and your enemies are so ghost-like, you're asking for trouble, especially when it's Namco. I still like this game. I'm not very good at it, but you know, it's always good to slam the door on an enemy or a ghost. What time are we on? On 2 hours 20, so I'm going to quit this now. Just wanted a brief look at that one. Now, there's still plenty more games to do here, but I think I will finish by looking at what remains my favourite, and I have looked at this before, and I'm terrible at it, and I've not played it in about a year, so I'm going to reverse it. Peter Pepper's Ice Cream Factory, which is the spin-off sequel to Burger Time. One of the 1984 games on the platform, but there you go, there's your little Burger Time chef, Peter Pepper. And this one's all about ice cream and making balls of ice cream. So you're pushing the ice cream around, you're climbing up ladders just like in Burger Time. You can't... I'm dead already. This is unforgiving. This could have done with some gentler levels to ease you into things. I'm 2 lives down already. But yeah, you push the ice cream, and depending on which button you're holding, you can push it up a level or down a level, so you can position it. You can... Let's try that again. Again, it's a little bit tricky if you're not used to it. Those in the deep end, this one. You can jump over enemies, which is very useful. But if you jump into them, they still kill you. It is ruthless, this one. So I really like it, but it does not mess around. Once you've played it a few times and you've got it down to how it plays, and you can avoid the enemies and you work it out, you know that's push up and that's push down. So push that up there. Push that way. Make a big ice cream. Push that way. Jump, don't jump, because there's 4 damage, unfortunately. That maybe it could have done without the 4 damage, because it's tricky enough anyway. Yeah, it throws you in the deep end, but once you acclimatise to it, you get used to it. It's all right. It's a good game. It just goes straight for the kill you off if you don't know what you're doing. Though. There you go, push that up there. Hold button 2 and push that up. Makes a big ice cream up there. The collision is a bit more forgiving than Burger Time too. And it has to be because, well, it's a really hard game. Push up there, make an ice cream up there, make a big ice cream here. You see, I've kind of got myself in sync to it now. So push that down, jump over that, and you can get the power-ups if you time it right. I've missed the power-up. Still got caught. Hey Delta Ray Studios, thank you for joining. This might be the last game or the penultimate game of the stream, but it's always good to have you here. Yeah, I mean, that's not really very hygienic because it's stepping all over the burgers. But now he's rolling up ice creams with his hands like they're dung balls and he's some sort of dung beetle, but I don't know. Peter Pepper is not going to win any awards for his food hygiene standards. Now, I don't know what the differences are between the two sets of this. I've never noticed them. It's probably some sort of bug fix, unless one's a bad dump and the other isn't. You never really know with these cassette games. But they seem to play the same, unlike many cassette games where, as we've already discussed, they are very different. And there we go, that's that level grid. You get more points for bigger ice creams. But I think this is a much better game than Burger Time. It might lack an easy level, which he could have really done with. It could have done with a very simple, gentle introductory level. I'm good, thank you, Delta Ray Studios. You know, I've had a good weekend, enjoyed Easter. We even got a bit of snow here today for some unknown reason. It's like it's April. I've got snow, but yeah, I don't mind a bit of snow. No, it mixes things. I'm doing worse this time than I did the previous time. But yeah, I've played this on the previous stream. I will probably play this on future streams because as bad as I am at the moment at this game, it is a game I do really like. It's probably one of my sort of, if I've got a top 20 main games, this would be in it. Even though I look like I've never played it before right now. Okay, so we are on 2 hours 25 minutes. I'm thinking about 2.5 hours for the stream. So I will play one more game. I just need to decide which one it's going to be. I played Manhattan recently. I played Highway Chase recently. So I just played Terranean. One of the 81 games. Terranean. Again, there's only a US version of this one dumped. But yeah, we're missing a few earlier games, but this is one of the early games that is dumped. Defend Terranean. Fighting start. Thank you for the $2, $2 Canadian dollars, the ogre. Much appreciated, as is always the case. You know, everything helps. You know, puts a little bit of money towards the drinks that I'm having to buy stream, or even just internet costs and the like. So it is always appreciated, the ogre. Thank you. But yeah, here we have, you know, a fairly traditional space shooter. Two different types of attacks. You've got to try and basically defend Earth. You've got to stop the rings being taken away from the Earth. And, you know, this seems like an okay way to... There's definitely a... I mean, if I look at the list... I'm just going to pause this for a second. If I look at the list, we've got Sengoku Ninja Tai, which is missing. Missile Sprinter, which is missing. Nebula, which is missing. The Tower, which is missing. Bobito, which is missing. Tsumigo Kaiju, which is missing. Genesis Boomer Ranger, which is missing, but there was a non-cassette version. Hello Gateball, which is missing. Yellow Cab, which again had a non-cassette version but is missing. Then we've got different, we've got UX 7, 8 and 9 code games, which are Tokyo, MIE, Clinic, Tokyo, MIE, Mahjong games. And there's probably like a UX 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as well that are missing. And for a lot of the games, we've only got US versions, not the Japanese versions, or some have only got Japanese versions, not the US versions. And there are probably a lot of revisions. So I would say there are still, while most of the unique games are dumped, I would still say there are probably more undumped cassettes than there are dumped cassettes. And that does worry me a little bit. Especially because we've seen absolutely no movement or discoveries of any cassettes in probably a good 4 or 5 years. I can't remember the last time I put some news about cassettes on my yearly write-ups, but it's been a while. So it's not looking good for them, unfortunately. Forever hold hope for these things, but we're talking about a cassette-based system from 1980 with non-standard media that wasn't ever that widely distributed compared to your classic computer systems and their cassettes. So I don't know. Sometimes you sort of have to appreciate what has been done to not try and focus too much on what hasn't. But I do think there's a lot that's lost, especially because a lot of them will also depend on the dongles, and if you lose the dongle and it's one that contains ROM data like the graphics like Explorer, the cassette dump alone is useless. For the encrypted ones that are just encryption, you can usually reverse engineer it. But ones where it's actual ROM data in the dongles, which is especially true of the later ones, and even some of the mid-range ones, the mid-years ones, then you need the dongles as well as the cassettes. And it's not ideal. It's definitely not ideal. Now, I'm going to give this another credit, but this will be the last credit of the last game for the stream. There are other cassette games to cover, not many, not a huge number, but I might do another mini stream where I look at the rest of them. Some of them are, say, just gambling games, slot machines. Yeah, you've always got to look at the positives and how much has been saved. I don't think when Nicholas started this project back in '97 or even before that when he was doing the multi-pack stuff, he could have imagined just what a difference the... Okay, I'm going to play another credit because that was terrible. I don't think he could have imagined just what a difference the project would have made and how it's inspired people to try and dig these things up and make sure that they're preserved and saved. And there's just so much that I'm absolutely sure would have been lost otherwise, without MAME being around. And these DECO cassette games definitely fit that bill. I don't think if there was no MAME, I think a lot of these would already be gone for good. And that's just unfortunately how it is with some of them. And probably will be. But we're very lucky to have the ones we have. And anybody who has the current rights to the Data East IP is very lucky to have these because they can potentially sell them and release them. They have a product that otherwise would have been lost. Fighting stock once more. Yeah, this is a solid enough shooter. It's a good looking shooter as well, I think. It's got a good scrolling background, the animated earth up there. And this is from what? This is from 81, so yeah, for an 81 game, I think this one looks really good. Not the most innovative of the games on show, but it's fast moving, it's colourful, it sounds like you'd expect an 80s arcade game to sound. Nothing not to like with it, really. Let's go. I've not got Switch, so no, I've not really looked at the Switch stuff. I mean, I tend to end up a bit behind on the consoles. I've got my PS3 library, I've got a PS4 at the moment where I've been playing a few games. But, yeah, I think in terms of the commercial releases, there's still a lot to learn. we've been doing it for over 20 years. Some of the commercial releases are kind of new on the scene. They don't really know what's important yet. I think with time they'll learn, and things like the sound core changes and the licensing changes with the new sound cores that are under BSD license will probably help with commercial emulators. We try and do what we can in that sense, but at the end of the day, the people doing the ports have got to write the system code and decide if they're going to give you option for smoothing or not smoothing. Pardon me. But yeah, the most popular ones are preserved in some form, and some of the ones that aren't popular, like the Graplop ones, were preserved, and we've got the whole story there. So there's some of the slot machines that are preserved. I mean, I said that was the last one, but I can fire very, very quickly before I close the stream. Ocean to Ocean or something like that. I mean, something like this is I mean, I'm amazed anybody kept the cassettes of this around. It's literally just a bet now slot machine. I want to do 3 lines. So I don't know if this actually had payout or if this was an entirely for entertainment thing. But this is a cassette game. And yeah, it's well, the fact that somebody still had this cassette around and thought to dump it shows that maybe there are still things out there. Lucky Poker's similar, it's just a gambling type game. So I still kind of hope things will show up. I don't know if they will, but if they do, if any Data East game is dumped that's not been dumped, or alternate version of one is dumped that's significant, they're exactly the type of things that I will do a special stream for, because they're worth covering. So if you're following the channel on YouTube, you'll probably hear about them. But it's been a little bit dead in that area for quite a while. So I don't know. I've not heard any news. I've not heard anything under the, behind the scenes, under the surface that's going on. But we'll see. Anyway, with that, we've done 2.5 hours. It's getting pretty late here, so I'm going to say bye, and I will catch you on the next stream. Thank you to everybody who's joined and taken part, had a little chat, suggested things for me, provided some facts that I wasn't not aware of before the stream. It's been good as always, so I will see you all soon. Bye bye.